Congressman Smith, thank you so much for speaking with Voice of America.
Well, thank you for having me on. Appreciate your ongoing tremendous work in getting the truth out.
The Chinese Nobel Peace Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo passed away on July 13th.
Yes.
You have been working so hard in calling for his release for years. You just held a hearing on examining the tragic case of Liu Xiaobo.
Right.
Can you describe how you're feeling and what are your thoughts right now?
Well, it's a time of great sadness that a man of his caliber and his wife, who was also suffering, but he sadly has passed away. I think, as was said by some of our witnesses today, it was a death sentence. We don't think much was done to early detect the liver cancer. What kind of assistance did he get? What kind of oncology services were provided? Drugs? What? It's a one big open question, and as Dr. Young said today, it was a death sentence. And for a man that got the Nobel Peace Prize, who was absolutely peaceful, made it clear that he didn't think he had any enemies because he wanted peaceful transition, respect for human rights, to democracy. And for that, he gets an 11-year prison sentence, and his wife goes under house arrest and just a terrible oppression. This rips off the facade of the Chinese dictatorship concerning its legitimacy, its barbarism, its cruelty, to have such a great man so mistreated in the light of day with the entire international community looking on. My belief is this has to be a pivot to human rights in China. All those glib talk in the past about we need to pivot to Asia and all that, that was always economically, of course. We need to pivot on human rights right now and say we demand that China respect universally recognized human rights, to which they say they're doing, but they're not.
Do you wish more could be done to help Liu Xiaobo while he was in prison?
Yes, much more could have been done. In all candor, and I say this in no way as a partisan, President Obama for 8 years did nothing to help Liu Xiaobo. He's a fellow Nobel Peace Prize winner and could have had great impact and gravitas in helping to bring about his release. When Hu Jintao was here, when Xi Jinping was here, when Hu Jintao was here, they had a joint press conference. And a reporter asked questions about, Liu Xiaobo and human rights. And Obama defended that, they have a different culture in China and they have a different political system. And maybe 30 years from now, something good will happen. Just doesn't cut it. That was an awful response. The Washington Post did a scathing editorial against him for enabling dictatorship. He should have said, and turned to Hu Jintao and said, release Liu Xiaobo. Do it now. And he didn't. So we missed opportunities for 8 years. And what the Chinese government is counting on, the Communist Party, is for us to be indifferent or enabling of their abuses. That's why the pivot to human rights has to happen now. And the legacy of Liu Xiaobo, of a great man, needs to be respected, because there are so many others like him, some whose names are not known, who are pressing for human rights and freedom in China, who are being tortured as people watch this and as you and I exchange thoughts here.
You and the co-chair of Congressional Executive Commission on China, Senator Rubio, released a statement urging the administration to seek the release of Liu Xia from illegal confinement. And in the coming days, what needs to be done?
It's a great question, and our hope is that the administration, which did make clear to the Chinese government we wanted both of them and the family to come to the United States or Germany, wherever they would want to go to get treatment. It didn't happen, but now I think we need to redouble our efforts to get his widow, who has suffered so much, who is brave and heroic like her husband, to the safe harbors of the United States or some other free country. And that will be our appeal. It'll be tenaciously requested and pushed. And I do believe that the administration will make a similar request, and it needs to be ongoing until it happens.
Liu Xiaobo is the most prominent Chinese dissident overseas, but unfortunately in China, he is not as well known due to censorship. How will his death, in your view, change the fight for improving human rights in China?
Well, I think, and in large part because of what you do, more and more people inside of China are becoming aware of not just Liu Xiaobo, but the very, very pervasive violation of human rights committed by the state. And it's not just about economics and making money. It's about freedom, and the oxygen of all of our lives, frankly, is personal freedom and human rights respect, the freedom to speak, to assemble, for journalists to write stories about the truth and not some dogma spoon-fed to them by Beijing. So I think more and more people will discover it. I thought one of our witnesses today made an excellent point that Perry Link, that 200 years from now, and then others on the panel said it'll be long before that, people won't remember who were the torturers and who did terrible things. They'll remember the beacons of hope, the heroic men and women of China who stood up for human rights. Tiananmen Square should have put the entire world on notice that the people of China want freedom. They're not getting it from their government. Our system in America has flaws, but we have ways of fixing it. We have, court system that's independent. We have Congress, House and Senate. We have a president. We have elections that we get changes of leadership. It goes from Republican to Democrat, Democrat to Republican. The people of China deserve that.
As you mentioned before, there are a lot of people, political prisoners, just like Liu Xiaobo, being detained in China right now. And on July 9th, 2015, China began an unprecedented crackdown on human rights lawyers, and you held a hearing about that.
Right.
How should the international community help right now these political prisoners that are in China right now?
Well, in the United States, and I co-chair the China Commission with Marco Rubio, we have the best database, we think, in the world of political prisoners, prisoners of conscience. We painstakingly, go through all of the information to make sure that when we say someone's a political prisoner, we have accurate information. Our hope is that the State Department, which has been lax and very much indifferent for the last 8 years, will change. That remains to be seen. If Donald Trump does not, engage this, frankly, as a Republican, I'll be a critic of Donald Trump. We did recently pass the Religious Freedom Act. It was my bill, my law, but frankly, we named it after the champion, Frank Wolf. We have prisoners lists. We want to designate people who have been a part of the problem, repressing, hold them to account, and we also have concurrently the Magnitsky Global Human Rights Act. And Magnitsky, which was at first just applied to Russia because of the mistreatment and death of Magnitsky himself, now will apply and does apply to the world, including China. So we can hold individuals, personal responsibility, individuals to account when they torture, abuse. And as Jared Gensler said today during his testimony, the sooner we get a list of people together, cobble it together, accurate, of those who were part of Liu Xiaobo's arrest, detention, mistreatment, and if we could ever find out how poorly diagnosed this all was. Europe needs to do more. It has been, I'm also the co-chairman of the Helsinki Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe. I was just in Minsk for a big parliamentary assembly, lots of lawmakers from 57 countries, including the United States. There has been some concern for human rights in China, but not enough when it comes to our European partners. They're too concerned, as are some in America, about losing the next trade deal, about profits trumping human rights. So profits are all up here. I got to make those profits. I like profits, but not at the expense of human rights. Just in our hearing, I brought up the fact that Wei Jingsheng, the great father of the Democracy Wall movement, told me in 1994 in Beijing, when he was let out briefly to get Olympics 2,000, which they didn't get. Then they rearrested him and beat him. But while I was meeting with him over at dinner, he said, looked me in the eye and said, you Americans and you Westerners don't get it. When you kowtow to a dictatorship in China, they beat us more in prison. When you are tough, predictable, and you look us in the eyes and say, human rights matters, and here are the political prisoners, and this matters to us, and we're not going away until you release them, people get released. The beatings are less. I've heard those stories so many times. Policymakers in Europe, the United States, and around the world need to recognize that this false sense that you cannot raise these issues because somehow there will be a loss of face, which is used with impunity to hide and conceal an egregious human rights record that China has. Speak boldly, be accurate, but be tenacious, because the people that are suffering the torture and the mistreatment are desperate to have advocates and friends that will do just that.
What should the international community do to carry Liu Xiaobo's legacies forward?
Well, I think the United States and the international community needs to pivot to human rights in China. And this false narrative that if you want to have some success with North Korea, you have to kowtow to Xi Jinping. If you want to get the next big trade deal, you got to just take your human rights concerns and throw them out the back door. The United States and other governments need a whole-of-government approach, similar to what we did with the Soviet Union during its worst days, similar to what we did to South Africa with regards to apartheid, when that racist regime, when there's a unity among freedom-loving countries to say enough is enough. And Liu Xiaobo's death sentence and his untimely death should be the rallying call to all of us to say enough is enough. Human rights matter. They matter to us. They're not just for Americans or certain Europeans or whoever it might be, or Latin Americans or Africans. It's for everybody, including the Chinese people. And we saw at Tiananmen Square that the thirst and the drive for freedom was as strong as anywhere else on earth, and maybe even stronger, because so many people took such risks and then paid such a price for espousing fundamental human rights, including Liu Xiaobo, who saved a number of people and got a prison sentence for that too. So we really have to stop walking on eggshells and being all worried about what Beijing's going to think. They have isolated themselves, and if they really want to be the global player and have respect, if you can't respect your own people, how can you command respect from people in other countries?
So Congressman Smith, you've been in the Congress for 37 years, like you said. You have been the defender of human rights for over 30 years. What motivates you to help the rights and freedoms of people around the world?
Nobody ever asked me that, or hardly ever asked me that. What motivates me is my faith. I am a Christian and a Catholic. I believe passionately in protecting others because that's what we are called to do as believers in Jesus Christ. And, I respect all faiths, and I believe that, the religious freedom laws that I've written, one, is all about respecting all faiths and making sure that people have the right of conscience to believe but for me, the motivation is my belief in Jesus Christ and his admonishment. It's throughout the Gospels, but one place where he says, whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you also do to me. So he equates himself with the person who by a situation, whether they be poor or vulnerable or a political prisoner in a laogai, that because they're suffering, it's when you help them, it's as if you're helping God himself. And so that's the inspiration. And it helps all of us to do this work. And I know Frank Wolf, my good friend, was motivated. Many of my staff were motivated the same way. We have more empathy and love, but it comes out of our faith. We don't try to tell everybody you have to believe as we do. But there's a famous saying by St. Francis. He said, always preach the gospel, but only when necessary use words.
Thank you so much, Congressman
Oh,
Smith,
thank you
for your
very much.
time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.